Hey, it's Joe here at Red's Fly Shop. I think there are thousands of anglers missing out on some great fishing opportunities because they can't cast big weighted flies very well. Maybe you get to that trip that you're doing in Russia or Patagonia, or maybe you're just heading to Montana and you want to throw some streamers against the bank, or do what I'm doing today, try to catch some trophy largemouth on a fly. Either way, anglers that show up to do these trips often aren't prepared to cast big weighted flies because it's just so different than throwing that dainty little caddis fly on our 5-weight rods. Today I'm using a 6-weight streamer rod with a heavy taper line and a great big fly, and I'm going to give you a few tips on how to cast streamers better. The number one tip I'm going to give you is going to be having constant pressure on the line, not letting your line get slack. And the reason is, it's just a really easy demonstration. This is worth the price of admission. When you start having an aggressive stop and start to your cast, what happens is this big weighted fly gets to the end of the line and you stop your back cast like you've been coached to do, and it works great with little floaters. It goes boing, and it makes a whole bunch of slack in your line and leader, and then you start forward as the caster, and then wham, we find tension in that big heavy fly in that line, and our cast collapses. We often hang the fly on our rod tip or hit ourselves in the back of the head, and I want to get rid of all that, and I want you to have constant pressure on a weighted fly so that you have a great casting experience. You can take advantage of those fishing scenarios. Okay, so in casting more heavily weighted flies, one thing we need to do is we need to get comfortable laying the rod down flat behind us, okay? So I'm just gonna throw my fly back on the shoreline there for a second. When my rod is flat like this behind me, I'm not starting my cast here because then I'm asking to throw the fly up in the air. But what I will do is I will actually draw my rod forward and I'm gonna pull slack out of the line just like that. Then I'll raise my rod tip up and start my cast right in here. Notice my elbow is very close to my body. So tip number one, practice laying your rod flat, and the key is practice. Go out and do this just like I am here tonight. Okay, so that's the first tip. Now to get constant pressure, we have to come back wide and forward tight, okay? And what that means is my casting plane, actually with my rod tip, I'm coming back wider with my rod tip, and then I'm coming forward. And it's gonna accelerate in the middle, and I'm gonna have these nice smooth transitions on the ends. If you were to watch me from a drone up there, my rod tip is gonna be moving in this oblong circle. It actually won't be oblong because it'll be parallel in the center. But I will bring my rod tip around in the back and then fire forward hard. I'll bring it around wide and fire forward just like that. And that is constant pressure. That way I don't get those harsh stops and starts and oscillations in my line that create slack and a very frustrating casting experience. So here I go again. I'm gonna come back wide, forward tight, back wide, forward tight, just like that. Back wide, forward tight, maintaining constant pressure. And there's one little way that you can practice this just to gain an understanding of how this works. I'm just gonna take 10 feet of line and I'm gonna make stops and starts with 10 and 2, just like this, just like I would with my little 5-weight throwing a dry fly. That is I can tell already that is not a good casting experience. I can actually feel that in my elbow. That's a heavy fly right there. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back wide, forward tight, and I'm gonna do it in somewhat of a circle, okay? It's a little exaggerated, but I'm never gonna let this thing go slack. Back wide, forward tight. And I'm moving my rod now in an oblong shape, and I can just play a little game with my rod right here in my fly, and I can say, okay, I'm gonna keep that tight the whole time. I'm gonna draw back before I get that big slap and that big shock wave coming back down the line. It's a constant pressure cast, makes casting big weighted flies very enjoyable. And if you enjoy the casting experience, chances are you're gonna get good at casting and good at catching fish in all those scenarios with big weighted streamers that I was describing at the beginning of the video.